Thanks very much. Next up, Dick Betts.
Well, I'm sorry that I have to pinch hit for Ike Wilson, who's had to go to the hospital for observation after his accident, because I don't have a well-prepared talk, but some thoughts jotted down in the past couple hours. Also, I'm not a real expert on Afghanistan. I haven't been there, although I have given a lot of thought and did a lot of research in the past on other problems of revolutionary warfare and counterinsurgency, which I may draw on a bit. I was also counting on Ike to give the most skeptical view on the panel about prospects in Afghanistan, so I may tilt my remarks in that direction. First, to start with the classic Clausewitzian point, as some people have noted, that war is politics, and that the measure of success in military operation has to be defined in terms of political results. And the aim of military operations is not an accumulation of tactical victories, but it's the construction of a stable and real government that's in control of a country and not a fragile or phony government. As Harry Summers recounted in his book about Vietnam, when he was an Army officer working on the delegation to the Paris peace talks, and in an off moment was talking with a North Vietnamese colonel, and Summers said to the colonel, "You know, you never defeated us on the battlefield." And the North Vietnamese colonel answered, "That is correct. It is also irrelevant." So the strategic issue is how military operations and associated measures will produce political control and a stable functioning government, and how the government, rather than resistance forces of one sort or another, will command the loyalty or obedience of locals after the army leaves any given locale in the country. Now, I just came back yesterday from a memorial service in Cambridge for Samuel Huntington, who I studied with a long time ago and who wrote the book Political Order in Changing Societies, the main theme of which is how hard political institutionalization is and how often it fails. And what a mistake it is to assume that effective institutions in many third world countries should be the natural order of things, as opposed to personalistic, patrimonial, or Praetorian systems. And as has been noted, what we're up to in Afghanistan is nation building, or more accurately, state building, which is not impossible, but usually difficult in the extreme for an outside power to accomplish. Now, people have pointed to success stories, the greatest success stories being Germany and Japan after 1945, but those are arguably not terribly instructive for the cases at hand. Both of those countries were economically advanced countries with prior experiences of democracy and coherent institutionalized government. I'm unfortunately dependent for most of what I know about Afghanistan on what I read daily in the New York Times and Washington Post. But it seems that at least one of the problems in trying to nurture and support and develop a stable functioning Afghan government is the extraordinary degree of corruption, cronyism, and exploitive behavior reportedly manifested by representatives of the government in many parts of the country. And while, as has been accurately pointed out, the Taliban also suffers from problems of disunity and other limitations, to whatever extent religious idealism or motivations of that sort are a significant part of Taliban behavior, that arguably gives an operational advantage in the contest for mobilizing a population or for taking risks militarily. Simultaneously, Taliban's willingness to use brutality and control by terror may be counterproductive in some respects, as is collateral damage from American military operations, but it can also be effective in other cases in which there is no viable alternative, in which the government can't pose a means for locals to have security against the Taliban. And I don't know any more about Pakistan than about Afghanistan, but I found alarming at least the story in the New York Times a few days ago arguing that a significant part of the progress, the recent progress of militants in Pakistan in undermining the central government was related not just to Islamist radicalism, but to real revolutionary appeal against landlords and the exploitive social system associated with Pakistani government traditionally. If that's true, that makes the opposition, it seems to me, potentially even more durable and impressive. I think the main question is the effectiveness of external attempts to provide an impetus for political development. Can the United States and NATO help to undercut the revolutionary appeal or the effectiveness of Taliban or al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan by encouraging, nurturing, and pushing appropriate reforms? Well, maybe. It depends on a lot of the particulars. But I tend to be skeptical by instinct about prospects for reforming social groups in control of governments that have vested interests sometimes in resisting reform. Not that it's analogous to the situation in Afghanistan today, but I'm reminded of the problem that was suggested by an anecdote told by Jeffrey Race, who wrote the book War Comes to Long An, about pacification and counterinsurgency in Vietnam. And as I recall, I don't remember if it's in the book, but I remember hearing it in a graduate seminar many years ago. He talked about interviewing some member of the South Vietnamese government. I forget who it was, but an official in the government, talking about how important land reform was. That if you really wanted to undercut the appeal of the Viet Cong and the communists, that real serious land reform had to be undertaken. And he said the guy kept looking at him and shaking his head, and finally the guy said, "But if we give the peasants land, what are we fighting for?" To whatever extent those sorts of conflict of interests exist in the forces associated with our efforts will complicate possibilities as well. There are all sorts of particular theories of counterinsurgency that have evolved and been perfected over time with experience, and as Steve has noted, especially there's been a very high learning curve in the last few years in Iraq, or I should say relearning curve, since unfortunately the American military had made a corporate project out of deliberately forgetting everything that we had learned in Vietnam. But one of the old arguments is for a sort of gradual expansion of government control through stabilizing particular areas and then building from there, the so-called oil spot theory. It seems to me that by some measure this also depends on making local populations capable of defending themselves, since you can't station army units in every village. Arming villagers in organizations, say, comparable to what in Vietnam were the regional and popular forces. On the other hand, I hear people quoted as saying, allegedly on the basis of great knowledge about Afghanistan's history, that no good has ever come from arming militias in Afghanistan. Which of those is a real guide to viable options, I don't know, but it's a question that seems unsettled. There's also the problem that to create a viable functioning government and stabilize a country politically, the problems and opportunities are asymmetrical. There's an old saying, I don't know if it's credited to a particular individual, I think I first heard it from Stanley Hoffman, who said that in this type of war, the guerrillas win as long as they don't lose, and the government loses as long as it doesn't win. Will economic development aid make the difference? certainly in some respects it's important. We can destroy lots of poppy fields, but if we leave the farmers then destitute or angry that their income has been slashed tremendously, are we that much further ahead in the contest for political loyalty? What scale of economic aid would be necessary? What types of economic aid would be effective? What are the relative odds that most of it would not be diverted through corruption? These are questions I think that are important, and if there's data or informed speculation on how to estimate that, I haven't seen it in public discussion. And that's leaving aside the question of sabotage by the Taliban. If you invest a lot in construction projects somewhere, and then when they're done, the following week they're blown up by the opposition, how are we doing? And finally, there's the dilemma we read about periodically in the headlines between military effectiveness in operations and counterproductive effects on popular opinion from collateral damage. The old saw that if you find and successfully kill 5 members of al-Qaeda, but also kill 5 civilians, all of whom have several dozen family members and friends who decide to hate you for that, have you helped the effort or hurt it? I don't know if there are well-informed or at all accurate ways of estimating that trade-off and in what sorts of situations the trade-off makes sense, but it seems to me that's a question, too, that has to be settled if we're going to really measure the odds for effectiveness of operations. I conclude by saying that really skeptical view might suggest that the lesser evil is to give up and withdraw from Afghanistan. But I would agree with those who have said the problem with that is the tremendous victory it would hand to al-Qaeda indirectly through the Taliban and the prospect that it would not reduce but perhaps even exacerbate pressures within Pakistan. And I would not measure the problem so much in terms of Afghanistan providing a platform for jumping off against the United States and mounting attacks in the United States, or even necessarily particular operations in Pakistan, but just the ability to have a secure base of operations within which al-Qaeda can reconcentrate, mobilize, organize, plan, train, and do things which have been much harder for them to do since their base in Afghanistan was eliminated after September 11th. With that, I guess I will leave it to the other panelists to correct me, since being a pessimist, as I have often told my students, I'm always happy to be proved wrong.